I was planning our honeymoon in Bali when I discovered my fiancé had already taken hers, with 3 strangers. Hey everyone, if you're new here, smash that like button and subscribe right now because we drop these intense family drama stories every single day, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next in this one. Also, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love connecting with you all. Now, let's dive into this story that'll have you questioning everything about love and trust. You know that feeling when everything's perfect? Like too perfect? That was my life 3 weeks ago. Marcus Kane, 32, software engineer living the dream in Scottsdale with my gorgeous fiancée Stephanie Wells. 6 years together, engaged for 8 months, wedding planned for next Saturday at the Phoenician Resort. I'm talking about the whole package here, people. The kind of love story that makes your friends sick with envy. We met at this company mixer in downtown Phoenix. She was doing karaoke, absolutely butchering Don't Stop Believin', and loving every second of it. God, she was magnetic. Still is, I guess. She had this laugh that could light up a room, you know? The kind that made you want to be the reason behind it. I was this boring tech guy, all spreadsheets and code, and she was pure energy. Marketing coordinator with this wild creativity that balanced out my need for order. But here's the thing about perfect relationships. Sometimes you're so busy admiring the surface that you forget to check what's underneath. I should have seen the signs. The way she'd come home at 2 a.m. with her best friend Brianna, giggling like teenagers. The way she'd always need just one more girls' night before we settled down. The way she'd get this distant look when I talked about our future kids, our white picket fence dreams. You're so serious all the time, Marcus, she'd say, running her fingers through my hair. Live a little. I thought I was living. I thought we were building something real. The night before everything fell apart, we were lying in bed going over wedding details. She was curled up against my chest, tracing patterns on my skin with her fingertips. Can you believe we're actually doing this? She whispered. Best decision I ever made, I told her, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. She went quiet for a minute. Then she said, Marcus? Do you ever wonder what it would be like if we were different people? I should have asked what she meant. Should have pressed her on it. Instead, I just kissed the top of her head and said, we're perfect just the way we are. God, I was such an idiot. The bachelorette party was supposed to be last weekend. Scottsdale bar crawl, nothing crazy. Just the girls celebrating, Stephanie had said. Brianna organized the whole thing, and if you knew Brianna Foster, you'd know that was already a red flag the size of Texas. Brianna's one of those friends who brings out the worst in people and calls it fun. Loud, dramatic, the kind of person who thrives on chaos. I tolerated her for Stephanie's sake, but something about her always rubbed me wrong. She's been my friend since college, Stephanie would say whenever I'd hint that maybe Brianna wasn't the best influence. She's just spirited. Spirited. Right. When Stephanie came home Sunday night, she seemed different. Quieter. She said the party was fun but didn't give details. Just kissed me and went straight to bed. I figured she was hungover and tired. Normal bachelorette party stuff. But Tuesday afternoon, my whole world imploded. I wasn't supposed to be home at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. My shift at the tech company usually runs until 6, but we finished a major project early and my boss sent everyone home. I was actually excited, you know? Thought I'd surprise Stephanie by cooking dinner, maybe open a bottle of wine, have one of those perfect domestic moments that made me fall in love with the idea of marriage in the first place. The package was sitting right there on our doorstep like a time bomb waiting to explode. Small gift bag, glittery and obnoxious in that way that screamed Brianna's handiwork. The tag was written in her bubbly handwriting, to the wildest bride-to-be in Scottsdale. You earned every second of freedom. Zoxo Brie. Earned every second of freedom? What the hell did that mean? I stood there holding this bag and something in my gut just twisted. Have you ever gotten that feeling where your body knows something's wrong before your brain catches up? That's what this was. I should have waited for Stephanie. Should have just set it aside and asked her about it later. But curiosity killed the cat, right? And I was about to become roadkill. Inside the bag was typical bachelorette stuff. Plastic tiara, bride's last ride, sash, glittery confetti that got all over our hardwood floors. Harmless party favors that any bride-to-be might get. But then I saw the boxers. Men's boxers. Used once. My stomach dropped. Like physically dropped. I'm holding these strangers' underwear in my hands, trying to process what I'm seeing, when I notice something else at the bottom of the bag. A thumb drive. Now I'm a tech guy. I know that thumb drives don't just randomly end up in bachelorette party gift bags unless there's something on them worth keeping. Something worth sharing. I plugged it into my laptop with shaking hands. One video file. 43 minutes long. The first few clips seemed innocent enough. Stephanie and her friends at some rooftop bar in Old Town, laughing and drinking. She looked beautiful, she always looked beautiful, wearing that plastic tiara and the sash from the gift bag. But there was something in her eyes I'd never seen before. This wild, reckless energy that made her seem like a stranger. This is gonna be epic. I could hear Brianna's voice behind the camera. Last night of freedom for our girl. Last night of freedom. There it was again. The next clip made my blood run cold. Stephanie was on a stage at what was clearly a male strip club, grinding against some guy while her friends cheered her on. The camera wobbled as Brianna laughed behind it. Get it, girl? Show him what he's gonna miss. I paused the video. Took a deep breath. Told myself this was just typical bachelorette party stuff. Harmless fun. Maybe a little wild, but nothing I couldn't get past. I was wrong. The next clip showed Stephanie pulling the stripper off stage, leading him toward a private room while giggling like a teenager. The camera followed them to the doorway, then cut out. When it picked up again, they were in what looked like a hotel lounge. Stephanie was sitting between three guys, not the stripper from before, but three completely different men. They were buying her drinks, flirting, getting handsy. And she was letting them. More than letting them. She was encouraging it. I watched my fiancée, the woman I'd planned to marry in 5 days, kiss one of these strangers. Then another. Then all three of them, while Brianna narrated the whole thing like some sick documentary. Mia, you're a legend. Bride of the year. Live your best life. The final clip was the one that destroyed me completely. Stephanie led all three men toward what was obviously a hotel room, giggling and stumbling, completely wasted but clearly making her own choices. The video ended there, but it didn't need to continue. I knew exactly what happened next. I sat there staring at my laptop screen for God knows how long, feeling like someone had reached into my chest and ripped out my heart with their bare hands. This wasn't the woman I'd fallen in love with. This wasn't the woman who talked about wanting kids and a house with a big backyard. This wasn't the woman who cried when I proposed because she was so happy. Or maybe it was. Maybe this was who she'd always been and I was just too blind to see it. Stephanie came home that evening like nothing had happened. Nothing. She kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, and started talking about some stupid wedding detail like she hadn't just blown up our entire relationship. Brianna thinks we should change the centerpieces to white roses instead of pink, she said, rummaging through the fridge. What do you think, babe? I think you cheated on me with 3 strangers and recorded it for posterity. That's what I wanted to say. Instead, I just nodded and smiled like the pathetic fool I was. Sounds great, I managed. She looked at me weirdly. You okay? You seem off. Right. Like I was the problem here. Just tired, I lied. Long day. That night I didn't sleep. I lay there next to her, listening to her breathe, wondering how many other secrets she was keeping. How many other nights like this had there been? How long had I been living with a stranger? Every time she shifted in her sleep, I wanted to shake her awake and demand answers. But what was the point? I'd seen everything I needed to see. The next morning she kissed me goodbye and went to work like any other day. Love you, babe. Can't wait to be your wife on Saturday. The second her car pulled out of the driveway, I started packing. I'm not usually an impulsive guy. I plan everything: vacations, grocery lists, even lazy Sunday mornings. But standing in our bedroom, throwing clothes into a duffel bag, I felt more clear-headed than I had in years. I didn't need the furniture. Didn't need the shared Netflix account or the joint checking account or any of the material things we'd built together. Those were just props in a play I didn't want to be in anymore. What I needed was out. I called the Phoenician Resort first. Wedding cancellation effective immediately. They tried to tell me about cancellation fees and deposits, but I didn't care. Money seemed pretty meaningless when your entire life was falling apart. Next, I googled cabin rentals Sedona and found a place 2 hours north of the city. Quiet, isolated, perfect for figuring out what the hell I was going to do next. The drive to Sedona felt surreal. Like I was watching someone else's life through a windshield. My phone started buzzing around 5 p.m., right when Stephanie would have gotten home and realized I was gone. Call after call after call. Text after text. Marcus, where are you? This isn't funny. Come home. Why is your stuff gone? Please answer me. I'm scared. Scared. Now she was scared. I turned my phone on silent and kept driving. The cabin was perfect, small, quiet, overlooking red rocks that made Phoenix feel like another planet. I sat on the deck that first night, drinking a beer and watching the sunset, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since I'd plugged in that thumb drive, I could breathe. 3 days of silence and I was ready to start throwing punches. Not at Stephanie, not yet. At Brianna. See, I'd had time to think about that video and something was bothering me. This wasn't just some candid recording of a wild night. This was deliberate. Calculated. Like, Brianna was documenting Stephanie's destruction for some sick trophy collection. That note on the package kept playing in my head. You earned every second of freedom. Earned it how? By throwing away 6 years with me? I needed answers, and Brianna was gonna give them to me whether she wanted to or not. I used one of those burner number apps to text her. Hey, it's Marcus. We need to talk about Stephanie. Coffee shop on Central, tomorrow at noon. She responded in minutes. WTF? Are you okay? Is Steph okay? What's this about? I didn't reply. Let her sweat it out. The next day, I drove back to Phoenix and parked across from the coffee shop, watching. Brianna showed up right on time, looking as obnoxious as ever in a hot pink blazer and heels that probably cost more than most people's rent. She was checking her phone constantly, looking around like she was expecting trouble. Good. She should be. I walked in 5 minutes later and sat down across from her. Her face went from confusion to something like relief. Marcus. Oh my God, you scared me with that text. What's going on? Where's Stephanie? She's been calling me non-stop, worried about? Cut the crap, Brianna. She blinked. Excuse me? I leaned forward, keeping my voice low but firm. I know about the bachelorette party. I know everything. Her smile faltered. What do you mean? I mean the thumb drive. The video. The package you left on our doorstep with your little congratulatory note. The color drained from her face. Marcus, You what? You didn't think I'd find out? You didn't think there might be consequences for helping my fiancé cheat on me? She tried to recover, forcing a laugh. Oh, come on. It was just bachelorette party fun. You're not seriously upset about her sleeping with 3 strangers while you cheered her on? Yeah, Brianna. I'm pretty upset about that. She stared at me for a long moment, then had the audacity to roll her eyes. Look, Marcus, I didn't force her to do anything. Stephanie's a grown woman who makes her own choices. Choices you encouraged every step of the way. I pulled out my phone and showed her screenshots I'd taken of the video, her voice clear as day in the background, egging Stephanie on. Last night of freedom. Live your best life. You're a legend. That's you, isn't it? Your voice. She pushed the phone away. So what? I was being supportive of my friend. Supportive? I could feel my voice rising. You call destroying someone's relationship supportive? She didn't destroy anything. God, Marcus, it was one night. One stupid night of fun before she settles down with... She gestured at me dismissively. This. That hit like a slap. This? Come on. You know what I mean. The boring routine, the predictable life, the white picket fence fantasy. Stephanie's been talking for months about how she feels trapped, how she's not sure she's ready for all that domestic bliss you keep pushing on her. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. She said that. Brianna's expression softened slightly, like she was realizing she'd said too much. Look, I probably shouldn't have. No, tell me. What else did she say? She sighed. She loves you, Marcus. But she's been having doubts. About the marriage, about settling down so young, about whether she's ready to give up her freedom for suburban mom life. So you decided to help her get it out of her system by sleeping with random strangers? I decided to help her figure out what she really wants. And maybe she decided she wants you after all. Maybe this was just her way of what? Testing the waters? Seeing what she'd be missing. Brianna nodded like this made perfect sense. Exactly. And now she knows. Now she can choose you with no regrets. I stared at her in disbelief. You're insane. You know that, right? You're absolutely insane if you think I'm gonna forgive this because she got it out of her system. Marcus, come on. It was just sex. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything. I slammed my hand on the table, making her jump. It meant she chose 3 strangers over 6 years with me. It meant she'd rather humiliate us both than just break up with me if she was having doubts. It meant she's not the person I thought I was marrying. Brianna was quiet for a moment. Then she said, so what now? You're just gonna throw away everything you built together because of one mistake. One mistake. I laughed bitterly. Brianna, she didn't accidentally trip and fall onto 3 different guys. She made choices. Multiple choices. And you helped her make every single one. I stood up, tossing a $5 bill on the table. But you're right about one thing. She's a grown woman who makes her own choices. And I'm making mine. What does that mean? I looked down at her, this woman who'd helped destroy the best thing in my life, and felt nothing but contempt. It means everyone's gonna know exactly what kind of friend you really are. Stephanie's parents had always looked at me like I was something they'd scraped off their shoe. Richard and Linda Wells. Old Phoenix money, the kind of people who still use words like proper and appropriate in casual conversation. They lived in Paradise Valley in a house that probably cost more than I'd make in a lifetime. For 3 years they barely tolerated me. The fact that Stephanie and I were living together before marriage was apparently some kind of moral catastrophe that they discussed in hushed, disapproving tones at family dinners. Back in our day, couples did things the right way, Richard would say, giving me that look that suggested I was personally responsible for the decline of Western civilization. It wasn't until we got engaged that they finally started treating me like a human being. Suddenly, I was worthy of their precious daughter. Suddenly, I was invited to family gatherings without that underlying tension that made me want to crawl out of my skin. Well, guess what, Richard and Linda? Your perfect little princess just gave me the ultimate ammunition. The drive to Paradise Valley felt like a mission. I had the thumb drive in my pocket, screenshots on my phone, and a burning need to watch their world collapse the way mine had. Their house was exactly what you'd expect. Sprawling mansion with perfectly manicured lawns and enough marble to build a small cathedral. Linda answered the door in her usual outfit. A tennis dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, jewelry that caught the light like tiny suns. Marcus. She actually looked happy to see me. What a wonderful surprise. We were just talking about the wedding. Are you here to discuss the final details? Something like that, I said. Is Richard home? We need to talk. Of course. Come in, dear. The living room was all white furniture and expensive art, the kind of place where you're afraid to breathe too hard. Richard was in his usual spot, reading the Wall Street Journal in a leather chair that probably cost more than my car. Marcus, he nodded, setting down his paper. Good to see you, son. How are the wedding preparations going? Son. He'd never called me son before. Actually, that's what I'm here to talk about, I said, sitting down on their pristine white couch. The wedding's off. Linda gasped. What happened? Stephanie happened. I pulled out my phone and opened the video file. I need you both to see something. It's gonna be hard to watch, but you need to know who your daughter really is. Richard frowned. Marcus, what are you talking about? Instead of explaining, I just handed Linda my phone. Press play. She looked confused but did as I asked. Richard leaned over to watch with her. I'll never forget the next few minutes as long as I live. Linda's face went from confusion to shock to horror to something like physical pain. Her hand flew to her mouth as she watched her perfect daughter grinding against strangers, kissing them, leading them back to a hotel room. Richard's reaction was even better. His face turned red, then purple, then this sickly white color. His hands clenched into fists on the arms of his chair. This can't be real, Linda whispered. This isn't our Stephanie. It's exactly your Stephanie, I said. This is what she did at her bachelorette party while I was home planning our honeymoon. Richard stood up abruptly, starting to pace. That goddamn girl. That goddamn irresponsible girl. Richard. Linda looked scandalized by his language. Don't Richard me, Linda. Look at this. Look at what she's done. He gestured at the phone like it was contaminated. We raised her better than this. We gave her everything, and this is how she repays us. Linda was crying now, quiet tears that she kept trying to wipe away. There has to be an explanation. Maybe she was drugged or pressured or... She wasn't pressured, I said, pulling up the screenshots of Brianna's encouraging messages. Her best friend was egging her on the whole time. Live your best life. You deserve this. Last night of freedom. This was planned, Linda. This was deliberate. Richard stopped pacing and stared at me. What do you want from us, Marcus? I want you to know the truth. For years, you've treated me like I wasn't good enough for your daughter. Like I was corrupting her somehow by living with her before marriage. Well, guess what? I'm not the problem here. I never was. Linda looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. We're so sorry, Marcus. We had no idea she was capable of this. Of course you didn't. Because you were so busy worrying about appearances and proper behavior that you never bothered to see who she actually was. Richard sat back down heavily. What happens now? Now you deal with your daughter. Because I'm done. I stood up to leave, but Linda grabbed my arm. Marcus, please. Don't tell anyone else about this. Think of our family's reputation. I looked down at her, this woman who'd spent 3 years making me feel like an outsider, and almost laughed. Your family's reputation? I pulled my arm away. Linda, that's really not my problem anymore. As I walked toward the door, Richard called after me. She'll probably come here. When she realizes you're serious about this. I turned back. Then you'd better decide if you're gonna enable her like you always have, or if you're finally gonna make her face some consequences. The last thing I heard as I closed their front door was Linda sobbing and Richard muttering something about goddamn embarrassment to the family name. Driving back to Sedona, I felt something I hadn't felt since this whole nightmare started. Vindication. For 3 years, they'd made me feel like I wasn't worthy of their daughter. Now they knew the truth. Their perfect princess was the one who destroyed everything. And somehow that felt almost as good as justice. I hadn't expected the satisfaction to feel so hollow. From my Sedona retreat, I watched Phoenix burn through social media feeds and mutual friends updates. The evidence I'd strategically shared was doing its work with surgical precision. Screenshots of conversations, carefully chosen witnesses, and that damning video had spread through our circle like wildfire in the desert. Sarah Chin, our mutual friend from college, called me Tuesday evening. Marcus, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. We all thought you two were perfect together. We all make mistakes in judgment, I replied, stirring my coffee on the cabin's deck as red rocks glowed in the sunset. Stephanie's been trying to reach everyone, but honestly, most people are just done. Chelsea and Mike canceled their double date plans. The Hendersons uninvited her from their anniversary party. Each update should have felt like a victory. Instead, I found myself staring at the desert landscape, feeling strangely empty. By Thursday, Jake drove up from Phoenix with news that made my stomach twist. Stephanie had lost her job at the marketing firm. Richard Wells had withdrawn his influence, and without his protection, her colleagues had turned cold. The whispers, the sideways glances, the sudden exclusion from client meetings, it all became too much for the company to ignore. She's working at some coffee shop now, Jake said, cracking open a beer on my deck. Lost her apartment too. Parents kicked her out completely. Good, I said, but the word tasted bitter. Marcus. Jake's voice carried a warning I knew well. I heard from Emma that she's been sleeping in her car some nights. In Phoenix, summer heat. I turned away from him, focusing on the red cliffs. The desert was brutal to those who couldn't adapt, couldn't survive its harshness. Maybe that was justice. But something inside me twisted uncomfortably. This wasn't just about Stephanie anymore. It was about who I was becoming in pursuit of that justice. The most devastating blow came on Friday. Brianna, in a desperate attempt to salvage her own reputation, had publicly thrown Stephanie under the bus at Mickey's Tavern in Old Town. Half our social circle witnessed her screaming match with Stephanie, blaming her for ruining everyone's fun, and claiming she'd tried to stop her. I'd orchestrated this perfectly. Every domino falling exactly as I'd planned. So why did I feel like I was drowning? The call started at 3 a.m. Blocked numbers, new numbers, numbers I didn't recognize, but I knew her voice immediately, even when it cracked with desperation. Marcus, please. I know you're screening my calls. I just need 5 minutes to explain. Delete. I lost everything. My job, my family, my friends. I know I deserve it, but please. Delete. I'm living in my car, Marcus. I can't even afford a motel room. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I stared at that voicemail for 20 minutes before deleting it. Tuesday morning, Jake called with an edge in his voice I'd never heard before. We need to talk. I'm driving up. Jake, I told you. No, Marcus. This isn't negotiable. I'm your best friend and right now, I'm worried about who you're becoming. He arrived by noon, his face grim as he climbed onto my deck. The desert heat shimmered around us, but his expression was cold. She came to see me yesterday. My blood went still. What? Stephanie. She's desperate, Marcus. Really desperate. She's lost maybe 20 pounds, looks like she hasn't slept in weeks. She's working double shifts at that coffee place just to afford a week-to-week motel room. That's her choice. Her consequences. She begged me to convince you to see her. Just once. The answer is no. Jake leaned forward, his voice intense. She says she has something to tell you. Something that changes everything. I laughed, but it came out harsh and ugly. What could possibly change what she did? What lie could possibly? She's pregnant, Marcus. The words hit me like a physical blow. The desert went silent around us, even the wind seeming to hold its breath. What? She's pregnant. And the timing? Jake's voice was quiet now. The timing means it could be yours. Or it could be one of theirs. I stood up so fast my chair toppled backward. The world spun around me, red rocks and blue sky blurring together. She's lying. I don't think she is. Marcus, she's terrified. She's been hiding it for weeks, too scared to tell anyone. Too scared to even get proper medical care because she can't afford it. I walked to the railing, gripping it until my knuckles went white. 6 years together. 6 years of talking about starting a family, about the kids we'd have, the life we'd build. And now there might be a child, mine or some stranger's, growing inside the woman who destroyed everything. She wants to meet with you. Just once. To tell you everything. I couldn't speak. Couldn't think. The desert that had been my sanctuary suddenly felt like a prison. Marcus. I need time. She doesn't have time. She's barely surviving as it is, and now she's dealing with morning sickness, medical expenses she can't afford. I said I need time. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then, the woman I saw yesterday isn't the same person who betrayed you. I'm not saying forgive her. I'm not saying take her back. But there's an innocent child involved now, Marcus. And that child might be yours. After he left, I sat on that deck until the stars came out, staring into the darkness and wondering how justice had become so complicated. The diner in Mesa felt like neutral territory, far enough from our old life in Scottsdale, anonymous enough that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. I arrived early, choosing a corner booth where I could see the door. My hands shook as I stirred sugar into coffee I didn't want, rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd handle whatever manipulation she was planning. Then she walked in and my prepared speech died in my throat. Jake hadn't exaggerated. Stephanie looked like a ghost of herself, thin, pale, wearing clothes that hung loose on her frame. Her once perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. She slid into the booth across from me, her hands trembling as she reached for the water glass. Thank you for coming. Her voice was barely above a whisper. This wasn't the confident woman who'd charmed clients and lit up rooms. This was someone broken, someone who'd lost everything. Jake said you had something to tell me. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. First, I need you to know, I take full responsibility for what I did. Not Brianna, not the alcohol, not anything else. Me. My choices. My betrayal of everything we had. I waited. I've been going to therapy. Trying to understand why I sabotaged the best thing in my life. Trying to figure out how I became someone who could hurt you like that. Stephanie Dash. Please. Let me finish. Her eyes filled with tears. I was scared, Marcus. Terrified of being married, of being tied down, of becoming my mother. But that's not an excuse. Nothing excuses what I did to you. The words I'd waited months to hear should have felt like victory. Instead, they just felt hollow. I lost everything. My job, my family, my friends. I'm living week to week in a motel, working doubles just to survive. And I deserve all of it. Every bit of it. She took a shaky breath. But there's something else. Something that makes this so much worse, and I didn't know how to tell you. My stomach clenched. I'm pregnant. The diner seemed to spin around me. Other conversations, the clatter of dishes, the hum of the air conditioning, it all faded to white noise. The timing. Her voice broke. Could be yours, Marcus. We were together 2 weeks before the bachelorette party. But it could also be one of theirs. I stared at her, my mind refusing to process what she was saying. I've been hiding it for 6 weeks. Too scared to tell anyone, too broke to get proper medical care. But the morning sickness is getting worse and I can barely work. You're lying. I'm not. She reached into her purse with shaking hands, pulling out a crumpled doctor's note. 8 weeks pregnant. The dates? Marcus, I don't know whose child this is. I stood up so abruptly that nearby diners turned to stare. The paper in my hands felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Marcus, please dash. Don't. My voice came out strangled. Don't say another word. I threw money on the table and walked out into the blazing Mesa heat, leaving her sitting there alone with her devastating news. In my truck, I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at that doctor's note until the words blurred together. Not only had she betrayed me in the worst possible way, but now there was an innocent child, possibly mine, caught in the wreckage of what she destroyed. I drove back to Sedona in a haze, the desert landscape passing by unnoticed as my mind reeled with possibilities I couldn't bear to consider. For 3 days I didn't leave the cabin. I sat on the deck, staring at red rocks and trying to process a reality that felt too cruel to be real. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw potential futures. A child with my eyes and her smile, growing up never knowing their real father. Or worse, a child who wasn't mine, but whom I'd always wonder about. Jake called repeatedly. My parents called from Tucson. I ignored them all. On the 4th day, my father drove up from Tucson unannounced. Son, you look like hell. I poured him coffee with hands that hadn't stopped shaking since Mesa. Thanks for the pep talk, Dad. He sat across from me on the deck, studying my face with the same careful attention he'd used when I was 12 and had broken Mrs. Henderson's window with a baseball. Jake told me about the situation. Jake needs to learn when to keep his mouth shut. That girl hurt you bad. Worse than bad. And she deserves the consequences of what she did. He sipped his coffee slowly. But there's an innocent child involved now, Marcus. Maybe your child. Maybe not. Maybe not, he agreed. But the question is, what kind of man do you want to be? The kind who abandons a child who might be his because he's angry at the mother? Or the kind who steps up regardless? I wanted to argue, to rage about fairness and justice and how I didn't owe anyone anything. But the words wouldn't come. I'm not saying forgive her. I'm not saying take her back. But that child didn't choose any of this. That evening I called Jake. I need you to check on her. Marcus Dash. Not for her. For the baby. Make sure she's getting medical care, that she has somewhere safe to stay. Set up a fund, I'll transfer money. But I can't. I can't see her yet. Okay. What about the paternity test? When the time comes. But until then. I took a deep breath. An innocent child doesn't deserve to suffer for their mother's mistakes. 2 weeks later, I drove back to Phoenix for the first time since everything fell apart. I met Stephanie at a different diner, this one in Tempe. She looked better, still thin, still tired, but no longer desperate. She was showing now, just barely, but enough that the reality hit me fresh. The apartment I'm helping you afford is temporary, I said without preamble. Medical care, basic living expenses. But this isn't reconciliation, Stephanie. This isn't forgiveness. This is about a child who might be mine. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. When the baby's born, we do a paternity test immediately. Yes. If it's mine, we'll figure out custody. If it's not. I paused, the words sticking in my throat. If it's not, we go our separate ways forever. Marcus, I know I have no right to ask, but thank you. For this. For caring about the baby even when you hate me. I looked at her across the table, this woman who'd been my whole world, who destroyed everything, who now carried a child that might be mine. I don't hate you, Stephanie. That's what makes this so hard. 3 months later, the envelope arrived on a Tuesday. I sat in my new apartment in Central Phoenix, smaller than the place Stephanie and I had shared, but mine alone, and stared at the return address from the DNA testing lab. My hands shook as I opened it. Probability of paternity, 0%. I set the paper down and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the city skyline. Relief should have flooded through me. Freedom. Closure. The chance to move on completely. Instead, I felt empty. The child would be born to a woman who'd lost everything, fathered by a stranger who'd never know they existed. An innocent life starting with nothing but obstacles. I called Jake. It's not mine. How do you feel? I don't know. Do you want to talk about it? Not yet. That weekend, I drove to the small apartment I'd been paying for, would continue paying for until the baby arrived and Stephanie could get back on her feet. She answered the door with one hand on her swollen belly, hope and fear warring in her eyes. It's not mine. Her face crumpled, but she nodded. I figured. The timing was always more likely. I'll continue helping until the baby comes. After that, you're on your own. Marcus I hope you become the mother this child deserves. They didn't ask for any of this. I turned to leave, then stopped. Stephanie? The therapy is working. You're not the same person who destroyed us. That's good. For your sake and the baby's. 6 months later, I was having dinner with Elena at a small restaurant in Old Town Scottsdale when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Marcus, it's Stephanie. I wanted you to know I had a daughter yesterday. Isabella Rose. She's healthy and perfect. I'm naming you in my prayers every night for giving us both a chance to survive this. I'll never forget your kindness when I deserved none. I hope you're happy. Attached was a photo of a tiny, wrinkled face and bright eyes. Elena looked at me curiously as I set the phone down. Everything okay? I looked at this woman across from me, a kindergarten teacher I'd met at a volunteer event, someone who shared my values of loyalty and commitment, someone who'd never made me question whether love and respect could coexist. Yeah, I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. Everything's okay. Elena and I had talked about Stephanie early in our relationship. I'd been honest about the betrayal, about how it had changed me, about my fear of trusting again. She'd listened without judgment, understanding that healing took time. Now, looking at her smile in the soft restaurant lighting, I realized something important. Betrayal had taught me the difference between love and compatibility, between forgiveness and reconciliation, between justice and revenge. I'd learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes it's stepping up for those who can't protect themselves. And sometimes it's recognizing that closure doesn't always come in the form you expect. Stephanie's betrayal had shattered the life I'd planned, but it had also freed me to build something, based on mutual respect rather than just shared history. As Elena reached across the table to squeeze my hand, I thought about Isabella Rose, starting her life with a mother who'd learned from her mistakes and was working to be better. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was how real justice worked, not through destruction, but through the chance for everyone to become who they were meant to be. Even if that meant becoming it apart. Put yourself in Marcus's shoes for a moment. You've just discovered the person you planned to spend your life with has betrayed you in the most intimate way possible. Then, in the midst of your justified anger and pursuit of consequences, you learn there's an innocent child involved, one who might be yours. What would you do? Would you walk away completely, protecting yourself from further pain? Would you seek DNA answers first before making any decisions? Or would you, like Marcus, choose to help ensure the child's well-being regardless of paternity? More importantly, when does seeking justice cross the line into revenge? And how do you balance protecting yourself with doing what's right for those who can't protect themselves? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious how you would handle this impossible situation. If this story made you think, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. We all face moments where our values are tested, where we have to choose between what feels good and what's right. Sometimes these stories help us prepare for our own difficult decisions. Hit that like button to help this story reach others who might benefit from it. And if you want more thought-provoking stories that explore the complexities of relationships, family, and moral choices, subscribe to this channel and stay tuned for daily stories that matter.